This is the Turf Zone Podcast, your central information and news hub, bringing together professionals from turf associations across multiple states to share things to help you and your business. Brought to you in partnership with our friends at the Virginia Turfgrass Council. This episode is sponsored in part by Sod, world-class service on demand. Visit us online at www.buysod.com. Now, let's get in the zone.
Welcome to the Turf Zone. In this episode of Virginia Turfgrass, I'm talking to Marc Moran, CSFM and Agricultural and Horticulture instructor at Atlee High School. Marc, thank you for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me.
So we're talking, Marc, because Virginia Turfgrass Council is doing a focus on education programs, and you lead the Turfgrass course at Atlee High School. So let's just kind of start and talk about what that program looks like and how it got started.
So it's a 2-year turf science course. We've been in place as an official program, course-wise, since 2001, 2002. In 2000, 2001, I was part of a multi-teacher department, and we were going through some proposed changes in our county. We were moving away from production agriculture and trying to get an idea of where our community wanted us to be. We're still a strong agricultural county, but our school system was trying to move the focus from production to more of a modern agricultural model. So in that year that was going on, we were talking about changes, but we hadn't really decided on what was going to happen. But I had taken on I was teaching landscape design, construction, landscape contracting, and I was kind of looking for some outside projects. And also we had gone through a coaching change in our football program. One of our assistants took over from our longtime head coach. He retired. And one of the responsibilities of our coaching staff at the time was to manage their athletic facilities. And that was across all sports. And this particular coach didn't really have a strong background. And he was like, I need some help. So I have an undergraduate degree in agriculture education and also in horticulture. So and some previous experiences, through my work with Southern states and even at home in our farm community. So I kind of tied back to a lot of those things, and I said I would try to do my best to help him. And most of my experience through Southern states was with corn, wheat, and soybeans. And I said, well, we should be able to figure it out. So kind of went through that discussion. And in the meantime, I was looking for an outdoor project for my students to work on. And we were focusing on land measurement. I wanted to venture into surveying a little bit and teach kids how to use surveying instruments and auto levels and transits and theodolites and things like that. So I kind of created a lesson where we plotted points on our playing surface of the football field. And they didn't realize it at the time, but the points I had plotted were our athletics logo. So A in swords, kind of like you would see like at University of Virginia or something like that. So this A in cross sabers look. And so I had plotted those points, had an alumni who was really keen and sharp in AutoCAD. So him and I laid it out on paper, and then we just did angles and distances and things like that, and did a little bit of trig with the kids and kind of used trigonometry to show them how to do these points. And when we plotted them, there were a bunch of flags on the field, and eventually some of the kids started to realize that it was our logo. So once we had the logo laid out, we went ahead and outlined it, painted it. So it became kind of our first ever sports turf project was our school logo on the 50-yard line for homecoming. And then we really got into it, and it was like, next thing you know, they were like, can you checkerboard our end zones? I'm sure we can figure out how to do that. And we were using backpack sprayers to spray paint. We had no technology at all and no knowledge. We just made it up as we went. So, and then my experience with the sports turf, and I got approached by our boosters about, we like what you did so far. Can you help us out a little bit more? And they had never really had an agronomy plan. We basically had our coaches put down whatever a salesperson who they work with over time, they trusted them, and they should have. I mean, they didn't give them bad advice, but they never had a plan. It was always, we got to this date, we do this. We get to this date, and we do this. But there was no long-term plan of how to build an agronomy type situation. So I kind of drew back on what I had experience with when I was a undergraduate and worked at Southern States and working with customers on building plans for their lawns and also for their gardens, and just kind of expanded on that. And then my college experience, in coursework, like for greenhouse planning, everything was on a calendar, and we built things based on water sampling and all this other stuff. So it kind of made sense to me to start building some sort of system that we could use. And it was applicable to all the sports. And so I kind of took this opportunity with the boosters. They had some funding. They were like, what can we pay for? So they gave me a chunk of money with my class to improve a practice field. So we took 2 practice fields, we made them better. We did things to help pull traffic off of them and just creative ideas, kids brainstorming and that kind of thing. So we really had a strong 2001, and our spring season was probably one of the better spring seasons we'd ever had. So at that time, we started having curriculum meetings with the county, and they decided that in 2001, 2002, they would like to pull out our agricultural production courses and our ag business courses and implement a turf science program. So myself and 2 other teachers in the county sat down with our vocational director, and we wrote an initial 2-year coursework competency outline. And so our CT director applied for special course exemption. So we put in this new course, not yet approved by the state of Virginia, but allowed to be entered into as a specialty course. It went really, really well in 2001, 2002. We had strong enrollment. I kind of started the program. I started coaching in 2000, 2001, and I asked my CT director, we set prerequisites for the course. How do I get kids in there? And he's like, just pick who you want. So I kind of went through all the kids that I taught, and I'm like, you're a great student for this. You should try it, And I mean, I didn't look for the smartest kid. I looked for the best workers. I looked for the kids that I trusted, kids that I felt like, you have an opportunity. You may not realize it, but you have an opportunity. So, I mean, I had a spectrum of kids, from the kid that was almost the valedictorian to the kid with a 4th grade math ability, but they all worked really well together because they all had a work ethic. And I felt like in the end of the day, I could trust them, because in that environment, we knew we were going to be working with equipment. We knew we were going to be working with, pesticides. We knew we were going to be working with fertilizers, and, those types of things. You screw up one time and property gets damaged or somebody gets hurt. And, that's where we really, wanted to make sure we covered all of our bases. And I wanted to find the right kid. And so that's how it worked out. I kind of handpicked my first group, and they held a very high standard of themselves, and they held a high standard just as a program. They really bought into the program approach. And those were my first students. I think I had like 17 in my first group. I still have pictures of them around here somewhere, but they really bought into what we did. And we kind of took the same logo we did the year before. We redid it, made it better. We overseeded. We started an overseeding program that we never had before, not really to the level that we wanted to. And all that kind of just fell into place. And so by the time that first year was over, I was approached by the State Department of Education, like, hey, there's a lot of interest in this, So myself and the other 2 teachers sat down, and we reframed our curriculum that we wrote in the first year to meet the state standard framework. And that in 2001, 2002, the state adopted the program. And since then, it's been a 2-year course sequence. You can take 1, you don't have to take 2, but you always, if you're going to get it, you have to take the first year. And we did it without any industry support or anything. We just put it together. And it wasn't until our end of our first year, I really started to realize I needed some more help. And I didn't have all the knowledge I had was, when I worked at Southern States, we used certain herbicides for corn, we used certain herbicides for wheat. And I kind of just found the turf grade equivalent to the same herbicides. And that's how I renovated my first field. Was I used corn and wheat knowledge, which, looking back, I mean, they're all grasses in some form or another. So it kind of worked out. But I reached out to some industry folks that were previously servicing the school, with our athletic coaches. And I just said, here's what I'm doing. And so I had a couple good sales guys that really kind of helped me out trying to figure out exactly what's the turf and ornamental version of what I was using. And then once I did that, we started to really build an extensive soil sampling system program where we were getting soil samples twice a year and things like that. I didn't know anything about. I didn't know jack diddly squat about soil samples other than whatever. When we would get them at Southern States, I would read the bottom and it would tell you a recommendation. And that's what I tell the customer. But I never knew why they were the numbers they were. And I never had the opportunity to learn the chemical side of soils. I knew the physical side of soils from soils classes I was in, and also soil science I'd taken in high school. But I never knew the chemical properties. And then that was something that it was a guy who actually had an ag education degree from the state of Pennsylvania. He owned a soil amendment company, still owns it. And I started talking to him, and he came and gave a presentation. And I was like, that makes a lot more sense than I've ever thought about before. So my personal growth is really, I think, where the program gained a lot, because in my experience with them. And then I got involved, kind of weird, the world came back around. I was approached by Marc Roberts. Marc Roberts is the sports turf manager at Stewart School over in Glen Allen, Henrico. And Marc and I had worked together at Southern States when I was a sophomore in college. And I finished up my summer internship and went back to college. I never heard from him again. We didn't know where he was. Super guy. And I was disappointed I lost track of him. But, the real world, I was a college student. I was going to meet somebody else new anyway. And, as opportunities came about. But he reached out to me out of nowhere and said, hey, we're looking for a school representative for the Virginia Sports Turf Managers Association. They had just kind of reformed or reorganized. And Tom Tracy was executive secretary for the board. And they asked me to come on board from a high school perspective and school and parks perspective. And so I got on board there. And actually, I was a member of the National Sports Turf Managers Association. And I went to a national conference before I ever was a state member. And that was because my boss here in the school got a magazine, Sports Turf magazine, and sent it to me. He said, here's something I thought you would like and show the kids. It was really interesting. But they had a conference listed for Las Vegas in 2001. And I went to my CT director and I said, I can go to the National Teaching Conference for Ag. And there's like one workshop that really fits what I want to do. Or I can go to this one, and every single workshop is something that I can use in class. And he said, pick the one you want to go to. So I said, I want to go to the National Turf Conference, Sports Turf Managers Association Conference. And so I went, and I was there for 5 days, and I went to every workshop I could possibly go to. And every one of them pertained to something I could do in class. But they had a trade show, I walked around the trade show, and I talked to industry folks that I never would have had access to before. And it was just like everybody they heard what I was doing. Here's this stuff, take this. And I walked out of there with, seed samples and contacts and paint manufacturers and equipment manufacturers. And, it's just stuff that I'd never seen before. And I came back recharged and had a lot of ideas and kind of put ideas on paper and talked to the kids. And it's like, we need to try this. We need to try that. And so we did. And we went really different and weird that nobody else was doing, at the school level. Stuff that was happening at the NFL, supposed to happen Major League Baseball, stuff that happening in NCAA. But for the high school level, it just wasn't happening. And so we started to do some of those things. And I reached out. I needed a piece of equipment. I reached out to a local Toro dealer, and they were like, here you go. Anything you can help me with, we'll help you. And that kind of started us off. And here I am now 20 years later, and I can't believe it, And so, but, I went to that first turf conference, and I met a lady, and I brag on her all the time because she's really a person that helped me in the very beginning do things that kids were really excited about. And painting logos and end zone work and all that kind of stuff, it doesn't affect the game in any way. It don't score touchdowns. It doesn't, doesn't create penalties. It does nothing to the game. But for the fan experience, it's totally different. And for the kids working on the field, it's a lot of pride. And I met Abby McNeil, and Abby was one of the assistants at the Denver Broncos. And at the time, she gave a big presentation on how to paint, what their paint program was like at the Denver Broncos at the time. And I just sat there. I'm just like, eat it up. That's cool. I can do that. Where do you get that machine? How much does that machine cost? Came back home, talked to my athletic director. I said, here's what we can do. Here's how much money it's going to save us if we switch to this system. And I figured out on paper, we would pay for this paint machine in 1 year. And, and when you deal with the schools, it's got to make sense financially. Is it going to work? And I'd figured out between the amount of aerosol cans that we were using and the type of paint system we had, I could pay for the paint machine in less than a year. And I did, because of cost savings from all the other types of painting we were doing. But here's what we can do. And then it opened up the types of things graphically we could do on the field. And, if you want to ask me who's one person that really kind of made it happen for us, I would say Abby. And I've said it at every presentation I've ever done, since 2001. She always comes up and she always sends me an email. She goes, you don't have to say that. I was like, it's true though. It's true. It's one person who took the time to talk to me when nobody else had to. And I never have let that escape what we do. And I tell the kids, listen, you never know when this game could be important for somebody, and it's not somebody on the field. Could be a parent in the stand who might be their son's senior game, daughter's last game in a high school experience, whatever it may be. But we only have one time to make this impression work. And next time it's the same thing situation. So, visibly our field looks amazing. It's a field that was built in 1991. It wasn't built to a strong standard. It was just built according to a specification that somebody got out of a book. It wasn't engineered, so we're making it work, and we have for a long time. So that's the other thing with the kids, that they realize that, this isn't the perfect situation. We're going to make the best of it. So I kind of maybe went on a tangent there, but it's one of those things that, how did it happen? It happened very organically. I mean, it just, one person helped you and you thank them, and all of a sudden they tell somebody about what you're doing, and those kids, and I go back to those first 17 kids that I have, everything that we've done today rests on their shoulder. They worked hard. They weren't in it for the glory, but they sure did work hard. We had a great time. We learned a lot. We made lots of mistakes, and, they laugh now because I had one paint machine. Well, when they started, we had backpack sprayers and electric pump sprayers that were awful, absolutely awful. And we made them up. We just didn't know what to do. And then now I have 6 professional sprayers that you would see in a college or NFL situation. And they say it's not fair. I'm like, you're right, it's not fair, but we have never gotten here without the work that you guys have done. And if you were to put the two types of work that we do now versus what we did then, they did it so well in a bad situation that you can't tell the difference in our good situation. And they did it so well. And I kind of, the best picture I have is from 2003. It was a sunset shot. We blacked out an end zone. We put a skull in it, and it was nasty. It was just like, well, it was tough. And I tell them, I said, they go, can we do it again? I said, no, we're never going to repeat. So since we started, we've never repeated an end zone design. That was just something we said way back when, we won't do it. And everybody's like, you're going to black it out again? Nope, not going to do it again. It was awful to do, but boy, it looked good when we did it, but we're not doing it again. So, I mean, it's just, I keep going back to how we started. And every year when we start the school year off, I go back and say, guys, this is, and those kids held everybody else to a standard. Like it was, you were going to get blackballed if you came in the class and you were lazy. And the kids would just reach you out. It wasn't me at all. I was just like, y'all handle it. We got somebody that's not working hard, and that's not and they didn't say get out. They just said, get in the boat and row, and you have to help. And so we've kind of carried that standard, in years it fluctuates. I mean, kids are kids, but we've been fortunate, and I really have a lot of admiration for people who get to do it every day at the higher levels, because, to do it to that extent, I try to tell the kids, listen, we're doing stuff now that, the people in the NFL were doing 15 years ago, 10 years ago, because they have resources that we don't. But to do what we do at our level, it's really cool to see the things that we can crank out. I challenge anybody, and I say this to anybody who listens. If you got a group of kids that can paint a football field in 45 minutes, let's go. Because I got 7 that can paint a football field in 45 minutes, and they flat out truck it, and it looks good when it's done. And that's just, but we got manpower. I have, in a given period, this year in COVID was different, but you give me 20 kids and I can paint a football field pretty quick. And, and it's done right. It's done the way it's supposed to be done. And, it's the same way. We just trying to get everybody to work together. That's a hard part. The details of actually the work itself is not that hard, compared to trying to get 20 people who are young adolescents to get to work together is the hard part. So.
For sure. So of all of the high school turfgrass science programs that I've talked to in Virginia and beyond, as far as I know, in my experience, you've been the longest running, you were established early. So you have the benefit of hindsight now with this, 20 years of this program. So, and I know that turfgrass science, the chemistry, the equipment, the grasses themselves through breeding are changing every year. And I know that sometimes in a secondary school situation, you can't respond as quickly to those changes as maybe other people can. Can you walk me through how do you progress in your program with industry changes when you might not necessarily have the resources that others could?
Well, we're still, the football field you see on the screen behind me is 90% Vaymont Bermuda. So that was a variety developed in the 60s to be cold tolerant, late 60s or 70s, developed to be cold tolerant. They is Virginia, Mont being mountains, so it's meant to be to the Blue Ridge. And so in 1991, when the building opened, that's what was sprigged here. There's sections of it that are newer varieties. We haven't gone through a major renovation. The major renovations we've done has been basically agronomic. So we're using fertilizers that are coated and different things to make sure they're more effective. The biggest thing that I've tried to do to make sure we're as current as anybody else out there is with our agronomy plans. We're all in a certified nutrient management system. I went and got certified as a certified nutrient management planner. So I made sure that we are doing everything the right way and agronomically, within fertilizers and keep Chesapeake water quality, all that kind of stuff. It's a big stickler for us. We're in an education situation, so everything we have to do needs to be tied around that. And, to be able to flip this field every time a new variety comes out is financially irresponsible to the education system that we work in. We're not a 1-school county, so we're at 4 schools in our county. So you got to imagine, if I was a 1-school district where everything was funneled into one facility, I think you can swing it a little bit better. But, when we make a change, other people want to make changes, and, it's tough. And we have to make decisions for the student. And so I don't see, we have to be really, really fiscally responsible for things that we do. Like I just made a big technology investment, through federal funding and different grants and whatever, we have a reel sharpener, and it's the best of the best. But that was also 5 years of discussion explaining how can we recover this? More importantly, what student impact will it have? And who can we reach out to when our students are trained in this? What can they do? And it really started when we went through our second or third revision of the state curriculum. And in that meeting, we had industry professionals who felt it was extremely important for students to know how to work in reel grinding and the maintenance side of equipment. And because there's a strong need for the industry right now. So, we are very slow reacting in a lot of ways. I still have a 1991 lawnmower that works really well. And so we maintain them. And, I've got tractors from early 90s, late 80s, but those are equipment that are built for long-term use. So as long as we're maintaining them. And so that's the one thing, changes in a lot of technology equipment wise hasn't really affected us too much, because a lot of that equipment that is really on the high end of change, phrase mowing and those types of things, those are very $60,000 piece of equipment. And, that we as a school would only use it once a year, twice a year, so you're going to spend a lot of money for one or two uses per facility. While that's better left to a contractor and one of our, big supporters, we have good connections and, they work with it, but I know who to call if I need to do that. So we've learned that there's certain things that we should invest our money in, but there's services that we can reach out for vendors that provide a service that they are the ones making that capital investment in that piece of equipment. So trying to also explain to kids, just because it's new and it's cool, we don't necessarily need to buy it, because we will never use it enough to justify its cost. Whereas something like a sprayer for me, I can spray and the kids can spray whenever we need to. And so a sprayer is a better investment because I can use it throughout the summer or into the early part of the growing season or late part of the growing season, and a kid can run it and they get experience. Same thing with, a tractor and a mower. Those are better investments for me than, say, a phrase mower or a deep tine aerator and that kind of thing, which are in 1991 people did do. The cultivation practices that are happening now were never done when I was a student, and they definitely weren't done in the beginning of my career. But I still realize and I'm aware that those are still pieces of equipment that are essential for what we do, but we don't need to invest in those. When it comes to grass varieties, is it time for us to have a new grass variety? Absolutely. But they changed so much. I mean, if you asked me 10 years ago, everybody's moving into Patriot, and now Patriot's kind of like, it's nice, but it's got problems. And then now people went to Northbridge and Latitude, and so now it's another varieties. So it changed. I kind of want to sit back and wait for it all to happen, but next year, it'll be 1968 again, and we'll have the same. So, but we're moving forward. The discussions that we've been trying to have with athletic administration and things like that is like, it's time for us to invest in a new grass system. So, we're looking at hopefully a variety upgrade, next couple of years. And, it's slower acting, but if I could pull the trigger today and resprig, I would do it today. But, those are things, but that's a capital project. I mean, our irrigation systems, those types of things, when a lot of people don't realize too, school systems aren't driven by profit. So, I don't have the luxury of saying it's going to increase the playability and our chances of winning, or you're going to yield greater ticket sales in theory, not like a professional baseball or professional softball or any other professional sport that are driven by profit. We got to find ways to, it's a big decision to renovate an irrigation system for us. I mean, renovating a track is a huge decision, and you have to say, well, what is it? What's the value in return, and what's the long-term impact of it? So, we're hopefully we need to do some things because we haven't done a lot of capital improvements, but that happens with education. There's always projects that take years to work out. And so we always throw our hat in the pile and say, hopefully we can get one. And, but equipment for us, I mean, we're trying to make sure that, and we're not just a one horse show. I got a 4,000 square foot greenhouse, and we've got a shop with ag mechanics that we have to keep going too. So, I mean, we're investing in welding technology, and we're investing in greenhouse technology. And unfortunately, those are things that aren't inexpensive either. So, we're not just a one dimensional program, and we have a broad program within our agriculture and horticulture department. So it's a lot of stuff to consider. Like I said, we're one of 4 schools. So take the pie, cut it in 4 pieces first, and then you have to look at what money you have and what can you do. We do a lot of fundraising and things like that. So, trying to keep up with technology is hard because it does change so fast. I'm excited. I have GPS light bar on my sprayer, so I know at least I'm going in a straight line. But that's still technology we talk about, and that's how I keep kids current, is show videos and things of people in our community. There's several vendors that we work with that do some amazing stuff. And fortunately for me too, they reach out to us, and sometimes they'll bring demos out and, show kids how it's, what we do at the other level. And then we're fortunate we have lots of connections in professional sports, so we can show people, here's what the Baltimore Orioles are doing. Here's what the Washington Nationals are doing. Here's what the Redskins, Washington football club's doing. A lot of universities, Tech, Virginia Tech and UVA both are on the top of the, heap around here, and Liberty, all different things that people are doing. And so they're not not much further than a phone call away to get that information to kids. So that's how we stay current.
Well, what I'm hearing and what I bet a lot of employers are hearing is that the kids coming out of your program have heard and learned some perspective on resources and how to use them. They're not just coming out thinking, hey, we need all the newest and best equipment. We've got to be.
Well, one thing I try to tell employers is, like, I wouldn't send a kid to you I wouldn't hire myself. And, they're going to be competent. They're not going to necessarily know everything about that one machine that you have, but they understand about equipment and how things run. So it won't take them long to get up to speed, and I can't teach them. I don't have the ability to mow grass like in a golf situation down to an eighth of an inch. It just doesn't work where we are, but that's the job of the employers. Hey, now it's your turn to give them that other thing. And I try to tell kids, take jobs where you can learn something. You shouldn't. I was under the guidance when I was a young adult, when I was in high school and things. Go places where people can teach you things. And I don't diss on kids who work at grocery stores and fast food places, but that wasn't me. I wanted to go. I mean, when I worked at Southern States, as soon as I started working, I started learning. I had to deal with customers. I worked with, fertilizers and all those different types of commodities. And it was one of those things that at the end of the day, I'm like, I didn't know that. And it was constant learning. Every day was a new thing to learn. And, my dad told me a long time ago, he's like, once somebody teaches it to you, they don't owe you. You can walk away and it's still yours. So when somebody invests in you and gives you knowledge, when you leave that for another opportunity, you take that with you. And so I always tell kids, take a job somewhere where you can learn, and at the end of the day, you can walk away and you still have that knowledge with you. And not that you couldn't get that at another type of employment, but if you're trying to stay in the industry, if you have an interest in the industry and you're young and you don't chase a dollar, the other thing I tell kids is, like, if you got a place and you're learning and it's in the industry that you want to be in, don't walk away for $1 more an hour somewhere else. You got the rest of your life to make money. Take the advantage and learn, and let somebody pay you to learn. And I think that's hard for people sometimes to wrap their mind around, at a young adult. Now, if I was 25 years old and, I have to make sure that I'm going to protect my long-term liability, my livelihood. But, when you're 16 or 17 years old, you really don't know what debt is. You don't owe things. I mean, you may have a used car debt, but that's not really real debt, and I tell them, you got the rest of your life to make money, go learn and take advantage of somebody who's willing to teach you, and, let them teach you on their time. But you're going to be a better employee. You're going to be a better, just overall better. And then when you go get that job, that dream job you want, you're going to have all those bits of knowledge that somebody else imparted on you that you can bring to the table. It's just another tool in the toolbox. So, I mean, it's hard for people to look at it that way. I mean, they look at a new cell phone and, I got to pay for this. I got to pay for that. I'm like, well, do you have to pay for it? Is it something you need, want and need, then you're trying to be a good advisor to a kid and trying to explain to them there's things that we all want, but there's other things we need. And, so you have to draw that line somewhere. I mean, I still get told that all the time. So, do you really need it? No,
that's really. A lifelong lesson for sure.
Right.
So something I noticed that you do that I haven't heard many other high school programs do is that your students do pesticide applicator certification. As a mother of a teenage person and being around kids sometimes, that makes me a little nervous. So talk me through, is that a challenge to get those kids to understand why that's important? And certification, I think, is fantastic. But how do you walk through that program with them when I know that even some actual working adult people in the industry struggle with that?
Right. Well, I think the first thing is that anybody who's around pesticides, the first thing everybody should do is do their due diligence to educate themselves. So I say that to the public, my administrators, anybody, before you go and get extremely upset. And I agree, public perception, and as well it should be, because there's been a lot of bad things done with pesticides in the past. First thing I tell kids is a question I ask all kids, and they can say yes, and I could not say yes when I was a kid. I asked them, raise your hand if any of you have ever seen a bald eagle in the wild. And every single kid in my class could almost raise their hand and say they've seen a bald eagle in the wild. I said, when I was your age, when I sat in this classroom, I had never, ever seen a bald eagle in the wild. And I said, that's the difference in 30 years. And I said, the reason is because they pulled DDT off the market. They realized the danger it had to birds of prey and the overall impact it had on the American bald eagle was a reason why that product, number one, was pulled off the market. And it is the biggest success story of a lesson learned in pesticide usage that made everybody go, oh, we messed up. And, but it's also proof that people can learn from a mistake and the environment was able to recover. And to the day, now these kids can sit there and say, I went to the river and I saw a bald eagle. And so, yes, we get a black eye because of what we did in the past. And the first thing I go through this with our science department because they are reading textbooks written based on information from a while back. So, there's all sorts of things that we can look at. And that's how everybody learns, because we screwed up somewhere. Nobody ever learns through discovery. It's all through mistakes. And so, and that's how we teach science. That's how we teach most of our things in schools, is things that happened in the past have taught us how to do things now. And so one of the things I try to explain to them is that, the stigma, which there should be, is that, pesticides are bad. The reality is not all pesticides are bad. And most of us use pesticides on a fairly regular basis and don't even think twice about it being a pesticide. And I asked them, how many people here went to a ball game at the Little League the other day? And like half of them will raise their hand. I said, how many put bug spray on? Every one of them raised their hand. I'm like, well, what do you think it is? It's a pesticide. So trying to kind of put their world, put it all in perspective. And then on top of that, try to give them good information. The first thing we teach when we start talking about pesticides is integrated pest management, and explaining to them that integrated pest management, our number one goal is, one, not to use a pesticide. What can we do? What are the steps that we can follow that allow us to solve the problem well before we get to the pesticide situation? So can we change it through rotation of crops? Can we change it through better cultural practices, irrigation, managing irrigation better? Can we aerate to remove compaction that prevents a particular weed from taking over? Is our nutrient plan up to snuff so that these other plants that usually are adventitious during these low fertility situations take over? So what is it that we can do ahead of time that fixes the problem? Because our goal is not to apply a pesticide. A couple of reasons. One, it looks bad to soccer moms and dads when you have a sign out that says pesticides have been applied. It looks bad because financially it's a lot more expensive to apply a pesticide than it is to do other things. So, we try to tell them, I'm going to teach you how to use them safely, and how to communicate with people in such a way that they understand what you're about to do is not dangerous, or you're doing everything you can possibly do to mitigate the danger. And so trying to explain the process to them. And what I've learned is that kids are better teachers because I teach them in mass. So it's one thing for me to tell somebody it's not a problem, but when you have 20 kids who have been educated in the subject and they show up to class and, the science teacher or whoever's talking, we had a civics class who brought in a person not long ago, and the person was just bashing everything about modern agricultural, modern landscape principles and things. And I kind of felt like I needed Tom Tracy with me because he would have been like, well, that's a good answer. But the kids really worked the guy over pretty good, and it's because they were educated in modern chemistry. They weren't educated in DDT. They weren't hung up on Dursband and, chlorinane, all the bad ones from way back. They weren't hung up on that. They were like, do you understand that this has to happen first? And the person was like, I didn't know that. I mean, the same thing with nutrients. People were like, you're over applying fertilizer. I'm like, one, it's too expensive to over apply. It's a financial risk that we take just by applying fertilizers. And I'm not about to put a fertilizer down that's going to go right into the drain and into the water, because that's even more of a financial loss. And it's just poor practices. And so most people don't realize the steps that we go through before we even apply a chemical or apply a bag of fertilizer. So the one thing that our pesticide training does is it educates the kids and hopefully educates their parents that the first thing we're trying to avoid is the application of that pesticide. Mm-hmm. And then if we do have to, the kids are all taught the proper procedures for mixing and loading and application. And all that goes through, I've seen where people take a couple of days to teach pesticide training. We spend 3 weeks or 4 weeks on it because it's important, but I also want them to be successful when they take their exam. So, and the other thing that I do is every time they take the pesticide exam, I take it too, because it keeps me up to date. And it also makes sure I'm teaching the things that they need to learn in order to be successful. So our pesticide applicator's license is a private pesticide applicator's exam. So it only has use in the production of a commodity on privately held lands. But, it's the same, but there's still, in Virginia right now, you can be 16 years old in a commodity situation on a privately held land, you can apply restricted use pesticide, and the kid's like, that's crazy. I'm like, do you know how many restricted use pesticides I've ever applied? I said, I've been doing this now since 2001. They're like, oh, how many? I'm like, 0, never have, I've never even bought one, but I can, but I don't need it. And so I think it's the perception of the danger versus the actual danger. And, with the new pesticides that are hitting the industry, I tell the kids, it's like, we're using things in grams per acre, types of things, not gallons per acre. And, it's the use of pesticides is so different now than it was, even 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and so I think I kind of equate it back to the 70s. We used a flamethrower. Now we have a sniper. We've got a pesticide that is very target specific, and it takes out one problem or a series of small problems, versus before we used a flamethrower and we just put it down and it was, we got that, but we also took out some other things. So just trying to get kids to understand the precision now that's, in place. And, they're the best people that I can send out into the world to communicate with the general public about the safe thing. Because, the highest order of thinking is being able to get somebody to take that knowledge and teach it again. And that's been super helpful for us, and that extends not just to pesticides, but in nutrients and things like that. I remember a kid told me one day, he said, I told my science teacher that they need to talk to you before they have that lesson again. And I was like, great, I'm in trouble now. He goes, no. He said, I said it in such a way that they understood that they were not necessarily wrong, but they weren't accurate in the current trends and things like that in the industry, and I was really impressed that he spoke up, because he wasn't one of those kids that typically does that, but he just felt like you're not telling them the wrong thing, but you're telling them not the most current information. And I think, you should maybe check with Mr. Moran, because he could get you up to speed on the new stuff. I was like, great, I'm going to be hearing that at a faculty meeting one day. But, it was really, I really was really proud of him for speaking up, because he's right. He wants the industry to be, projected in a positive way. And, not just the turf industry, but agriculture in general. There's a lot more to it than people realize. And I had the good opportunity not long ago to speak to an AP biology class. And, they came in here and they wanted to learn about hydroponics, and we have a pretty substantial hydroponics program. And next thing you know, they didn't expect the horticulture teacher to talk about cations and anions and positive charges and negative charges of particles and molecules. And they were like, that wasn't what we were expecting. And we were just talking about pH, and all of them talk about, oh yeah, we do a soil test, we do pH, and not a single person in that class understood what pH was. So, it was our opportunity to teach them, and they just thought this classroom down here was doing kind of old hickish kinds of things. And we were, had a good opportunity to teach them. And the kids were like, I don't think anybody knew what you're going to tell them. So it worked out really well. So, and we get that all the time.
I like that those building blocks are there. One, for responsible use of any chemicals, fertilizers, or pesticides that you're using, and that the scientific foundation is there too, because I think that's an industry-wide perception issue where we're presenting ourselves as professionals in turfgrass management, not just the guy who's mowing the lawn. And in starting where you are with high school students and ingraining that knowledge early that they can communicate to others is a huge step for the future of the industry. And, focus now with VTC for sure. And even the local and national STMA is environmentally conscious management. And I love that that's starting at the groundwork where you are.
Well, and a lot of our kids are, people ask me, how many kids go into the industry? And I said, well, we're like any other, content area. We're happy if 10% of our kids go into the industry, and we probably get that or a little bit more. I said, but here's the big thing for me is at the end of the day, all of my students are educated consumers. They're the people who can go out there, and they don't have to rely on somebody at a box store telling them how much fertilizer to put down, because they've done the math already and they know how much. That reading the bag doesn't know what your soil sample said, but the kid does. So at the very least, our kids are walking out as educated consumers, and they're able to put themselves in a situation where they're not being taken advantage of by somebody who rolls up in a pickup truck and just says, I cut grass. And they're like, well, I'm looking for a lawn professional. I'm not looking for somebody who just cuts grass, and then they can have an educated discussion with that potential vendor and say, here's what I'm interested in, and can you provide that service? And so at the very least, all kids walk out with being educated consumers. So, and I think that's almost as important as putting somebody in the industry, because they actually protect people that are professionals in the industry by being that way.
Definitely. All right, Mark, I'm just going to shift gears entirely, and I've got to ask about your spring this year with double seasons and multiple sports. And, I follow you on Twitter, so I've seen some of the work that your kids have done. Talk to me about how that all came together and how you executed that for multiple seasons.
Our COVID situation.
Yes.
So we're no different than any other school who's had to run sports. So we closed school March 16th or so of 2020. I'm on an extended contract, my colleague, and we're on extended contracts, both of us. And, so our principal was like, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if we're going to be back in 2 weeks. So we need to be prepared. At the time, our spring season they played one scrimmage. Most of our teams had played a single scrimmage, and we weren't sure. And we came back from spring break if we were going to be back at school. We were preparing the whole time as if we were. And then, of course, when we got back from spring break, it wasn't long after that they told us that we were going to be closed the rest of the year. But I run a greenhouse too, and this field behind me on the screen, it still runs. It's like I told the principal, he's like, they don't want anybody here. I'm like, well, this monster still goes and does its thing every day. I said, somebody's going to have to take care of it. So first thing we did was we reached out to the school system and said, what do we do? Because these facilities, you just can't turn the lights off and walk out the door. It's got to be maintained. So we figured out what protocols we needed to follow in order to be safe. And so that was the first thing, was working with, school administration, school board administration, and figure out exactly what we could do. And then we spent the whole summer not knowing. So we went from March 16th, do we transition our product out? What do we do? And once we knew the school year was over, we went ahead and 1st of April or so and basically transitioned all of our overseeded fields back to pure Bermuda. And then just said, well, we'll have a super grow-in year. So we started our grow-in for the fall, not knowing what was going to happen in the fall and late April, early May, and just started to build the system, the stadium and all of our game facilities and practice facilities. I mean, we cared about sprigging. We went ahead and just prepared as if we were going to be playing a sport. As we got closer to the month of August, it was apparent that wasn't going to happen. So we just continued to do our thing. As a school system, we shifted. We were on a every other day schedule traditionally since 1991, where we have what they call an AB block. So we have 4 classes on an A day, and we have a different 4 classes on a B day, and those would alternate every other day. The school system decided at that point we're going to go to a 4x4 system. So I had a semester of only 4 classes, and we met every day. And then the second semester, we'd have a new group of 4 classes, and we would meet every day. That was a big challenge for us because we're used to having alternating courses. So certain classes would do things on certain days and all that. Well, that all went out the window. So I only had 1 turf class because we dropped enrollment. Only, I'd say about 20% or 20, maybe 30% of our student population elected to go online. We still had over 1,000 students in school. And we were also, Hanover County was also one of the few school systems in the state that elected to go full time. So we didn't have, kids on Monday and Tuesday and then a break and then different kids on Thursday, Friday. We had the same kids every day for 5 days. So we were in person right out the chute. In September 8th or so, we were full tilt in person. Lots of protocols in place, mask wearing, the whole deal, cleaning, all that stuff that we had to do to meet the requirements for the state of Virginia's health department. But with all that going on, we knew we weren't having fall sports. We still had a facility that had to get managed. We knew, so we spent a lot of time in the fall doing all of our seeding applications, fertilizer applications, cleanups, what we needed for pesticides, whatever we were doing. And we still carried class out as if we were having a fall season. We just didn't do a lot of heavy field work, which was really tough because we're usually swamped on the fields. We're usually dealing with 2 practice facilities that needed to get worked out every day. We used to have, 3 practice facilities. We had a field hockey facility and then 2 practice fields for our football program. And then we had the stadium. So those fields plus a middle school field that was under a lot of, we maintained that to help out with our lacrosse program, and then middle school football uses that. So we still managed our fields. We just didn't mark anything. We didn't paint anything. So it saved us a lot of money on paint budget, but we knew going into about October or so that we were going to have some sort of fall sports season. Wasn't really outlined really strongly yet, but we were going to do something, but that was going to happen in the winter. And so we're going to be putting traffic on a field that's 90%, it's typically, most of the time it's dormant when we're never been dormant playing on it. And all of a sudden we're going to be putting traffic on a dormant field. And that field had to survive all of a fall season and then all of our spring season. So we had winter sports, typically when winter sports were going to be held indoors. And then we rolled into late February or so into March. And all of a sudden we're going to have, spring sport or fall sports. So we're going to prepare for field hockey and football on our fields and somehow or another maintain cover. And one of the challenges was with our coaches is to work with them to say, we need to develop a very effective traffic plan, because that's kind of a big thing that I've always been focused on, because it doesn't cost us any money to manage traffic. If we just tell coaches rotate, put a cone out versus let's painting a line, anything we can to be creative in how we coach, that will save us a tremendous amount of resources and keep the field playable for not just your season. Now we got to look to another season right after you. So we really committed on our game facilities to a heavy overseeding program. So we could manage traffic on stadiums pretty effectively, because we knew that there was only going to be so many field hockey games in a given span of time. We knew there was going to be so many football games in this given span of time. So we could kind of keep our stadiums under a close watch. What we couldn't do was really give the attention we need to at the practice facilities. And we had to really rely on coaches to be very, very disciplined in how they practiced. And, that came from, I coach as well. So, at the middle school, but we didn't have any middle school sports. So I did whatever I could to help the coaching staffs out in all the different sports. But if I was to coach this drill, this is how I would do it. And try to think differently, change the way we coach versus telling them not to do it. Let's move over here and do it over here. So we try to do things whatever we could to make some out of play areas playable so they could carry out things to reduce traffic. It wasn't always perfect because I would get heartburn at night looking at things, but also too, I couldn't tell a coach not to coach either. So it's just, this is balancing act of what can you do? And so being able to really find that fine line of let's make this choice, where we at. And then like even the athletic administration had to decide, tonight's not going to be a good night to play. When would be a good night? So we had to cancel and move some games around and all that kind of stuff because we knew because of the dormant nature of the Bermuda grass fields that we had, if we did a lot of damage, we weren't going to recover for spring. And we felt like we had to do everything we can to preserve the playing surface for the whole. So we had to make a decision for the whole, not for the few. And that's hard for coaches because coaches are coaches. They're right here. They're focused on their thing. And I understand that too, because I'm the same way when I'm doing my thing. But so you have to kind of explain to them, this is a different situation than we've ever been in before. And as a grower, it's really difficult. So, but we pulled it off. We covered things up when we had to. We put blankets out when we had to. We had rules in place for games that you couldn't warm up. Like in soccer and lacrosse, we asked our visiting teams and our home team not to use the game creases and the game goal areas to pregame. So we would slide the goal over 10 feet. And we would say pregame here. And when the game starts, we'll slide the goal back over to the crease. And you wouldn't think that mattered. But if you did it yesterday, 10 feet to the left, and then the next game we did it 10 feet to the right, we could spread traffic out over a long period of time and never put in, this was the first year I haven't had to re-sprig and resaw goal mounts. So we learned new ways to do things. So it's forced us to be creative. So I'm kind of thankful for that. And, I had a crew of 7 kids. That's what I had in my second semester class because of the way some kids were able to get their electives that they wanted. Some kids weren't able to. So I only had 7 kids that could get their elective. And so I managed an entire football season with 7 kids, entire soccer season and lacrosse season and field hockey season with 7 kids. So, but if I could have picked 7 kids, I'm glad I picked those 7, because we didn't have a lazy one in the bunch. They all knew exactly what to do. You could tell 3 to go this way, 4 to go that way. And when you walked back and you turn your back to them, you knew the 3 were working and the 4 were working. And I give a lot of credit to them because they were very disciplined. And, I think it's because I gave them all I bought 2-way radios for them all. So they were all within earshot. So, but it worked out. We had a way to communicate and that's stuff that we didn't think about. And, when COVID hit, we had to find new ways to, every kid got their own pair of gloves. Every kid, they had their own set of pruners. We had to really get creative and it wasn't just outside. We had to do it inside too. I mean, in a greenhouse situation, totally different world, and same thing in our shop situation, every kid, their own toolbox. Before we didn't have that, and now we can sit back and go, this was really a good idea to do it this way because we actually lost less tools. We didn't have pruners missing because some kid put them somewhere. He was responsible every day to put his back in his spot, so it was that way with our equipment too. I mean, the kids really took care of things and, as bad as everything was in 2021 and 2020, we kind of came out of it with a lot of positives. So, but the fields played well, the kids played well. I mean, we were fortunate. I'm very proud of what they did. So, plus take lots of good pictures.
So now that you've survived that those extra challenges and maybe come out on the other side better, let's close with this. What are your goals for the program going forward beyond maintaining the structure and the students that you have now? What do you hope you guys do when you grow through the future?
Well, I think we like. You talk about the environmental side of things, that's where I'm kind of at right now. I think we do things really well. We're pretty responsible, and I think to get a rubber stamp on what you're doing, whether it's a Ducks Unlimited type of thing or if it's Audubon Society. We're kind of looking down that road. How can we cement ourselves as an environmental stewardship program? So we're looking right now, we've kind of pulled the application out for the STMA's environmental facility. It's important to me because I think it once again paints our program in the light that it should be painted in, that we are very responsible about what we do and how we do it. We're not being reckless with our nutrients, not being reckless with our pesticides, and we're trying to be very conscious about the environment overall, and water quality being a big thing. So that's a goal for us is, maybe in the next year to two, we have that plaque on the wall, and I constantly look for ways to get kids recognition. One of the biggest things that we've been able to do and through support of the county is to develop our Twitter account and our social media presence, because, the kids are working hard and they're doing things that most people don't. I mean, and I'll say that about, their programs all around our community that are turf programs. And, myself, I'm just one small program, but you have, Drew Miller up at Brentsville is doing amazing stuff, and Drew and I, when he started off, he came here and we sat down, we talked a long time about what we do and how we do it, and we're different in a lot of ways, but we're very similar. You go to Louisa County and you sit down and talk to Logan. Logan does his stuff differently. He has a different background than I have, but we all know what we want. And we have, we get the best out of our kids, and that's the best you can do, and you start moving out toward the valley and seeing a lot of growth in programs out there, and then Southwest Virginia, there's lots of opportunities. And, one of the things that we want to see, and then one thing that Dr. Sandor and Dr. Goatley at Tech, have been really big on, and we're trying to open it up to more youth. And it's not just a program like mine that has a turf program, but with FFA opportunities for kids and contests. There's a career development event that Dr. Goatley and myself and several other people have been trying for a long time to get going at the National FFA, but we learned from them that they want us to see them started at the grassroots. So we've worked with a lot of states to try to get a state FFA career development event contest for kids to do at Virginia Tech in the summertime. And we had one 2 years ago. And then of course, COVID kind of threw a monkey wrench into this past summer, but we went participated in that. And I think that was one of those things that for Virginia Tech, it was an eye-opening experience, because there's a lot of kids, and it's not just kids in my program. And there's kids that may be at Turner Ashby High School or Fort Defiance High School or, John S. Battle High School, somewhere or anywhere else that may not have a turf program, but they got kids that are interested in this kind of stuff. They may be avid golfers, maybe run a pickup truck starter up operation where they want to be long-term, professional lawn care guys. And, their interest in turf is just as strong as my kids. And, so get kids opportunities to participate and be recognized for achievement in that way. I think that's important. And, I'd like to see more of my kids in Virginia Tech, or any other program across the country that offers turf science. So, I'm awful proud of all my alumni that are in the industry today. I was proud to have kids. I had a kid that did an internship at the Padres, and I've had a kid do an internship at the Miami Marlins, and I've had kids on PGA courses that were in the U.S. Open. And, I'm tickled to death, that they're doing that kind of stuff. And I've had kids who've been in the industry and then find out they have other passions somewhere else. And hey, as long as you're passionate about it, I don't care, be passionate about whatever you want to be in. And, but I still have kids who now have home lawns that call us, and I remember doing this in class. Am I doing this right? So I send you pictures, and they're striping their front yard a certain way. But I've got some alumni that have done super, super well in the local lawn care business and lawn and landscape businesses. And I still call them now because they have technology that I don't have. And I'm always tickled. And I tell them sometimes I got to go out and do internships somewhere in the summertime. So let me know if you need help. And I've worked for some of them, whatever you the boss now, whatever you tell me to do, whatever you tell me to do, I do it. So, but, long term is we just want to continue to be relevant, and I think that with, the things that are happening in the industry today, there's a lot of opportunity for our kids to help paint the industry in the light that it should be painted in. And we see it all the time now, professional sports, and how important it is for people to recognize natural grass versus synthetic. And that's a whole debate. And, but our kids are they understand the answers, and the rationale for different things. And, you can't talk about one without talking about the other. And, our kids, though, are definitely people who are educated. I mean, I spend 50% of my time I spend in the classroom with the first year group. Why? Because there's a lot of science. And I want them to understand that. I want their parents to understand that. And, get parents to understand that this is a good opportunity for kids long term. And, I always laugh. I said, people get PhDs in this stuff, so it's important. And I think, for me, if you're looking at a thing that we want that environmental stewardship recognition, we're always looking for a field of the year. It's all we've got a couple on the wall. We wouldn't mind having a couple more, but that gives those kids, and that's not for me, that's for them. So, the kids work hard and they deserve to be recognized if they've done good work. And if they haven't been done good work and other schools have done better work, then kudos to them as well, because they deserve it, and a very humbling experience. The first time we were a national field of the year winner, and that was really a fun thing for our kids and, our community and everything else. And, but for me, it was really humbling because I was on stage with people that I looked up to and knew in the industry. And I was like, I can't believe I'm sitting here, and they were like, how do you do it? I was like, I got 25 amazing kids back home that put me on this stage, and I'm just here holding the plaque for them because their name's on it, not mine, so to me, that's important.
Well, Mark, you definitely have a fantastic program, and I know that the other programs around Virginia and elsewhere are kind of looking to you guys as trailblazers, and you certainly have earned that recognition. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Don't miss an episode of Virginia Turfgrass. Subscribe at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also visit us at theturfzone.com.
You've been listening to The Turf Zone. Thank you to our sponsors, including Buy Sod, world-class service on demand. Visit us online at www.buysod.com. For more episodes of The Turf Zone, visit theturfzone.com and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast app.